Howdy gamers, in this video I'm not going to be talking so much about what runes to run on Twisted Fate, but more so why to run the runes that are good on him. Really the only keystone options that you have is going to be Summoner Spellbook, Arcane Comment, and then Electrocute. Things like Predator are kind of a hack and better used on other champions. You don't need Predator as you already have global pressure with your ult. Being able to move to a side lane faster with Predator, that's the whole benefit of it, is giving you the movement speed to get to that side lane faster. Twisted Fate has an ult to do that by itself. Electrocute can give you more burst as it gives you access to more damage, and when you run it with Ignite, you can kill your lane opponent at stages of the game that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. So it's completely viable on Twisted Fate, especially in solo queue, but I don't think it's his best option. And then with Arcane Comment, you get access to a lot of poke, as you have Arcane Comment plus Scorch, both giving you more damage whenever you land an ability. Mostly your gold card or your red card, as it guarantees the Arcane Comment to land. And then everything from the sorcery tree is also not terrible for Twisted Fate. But I think that Unsealed Spellbook is his most viable keystone. With Unsealed Spellbook, you can swap a summoner spell every so often. You get your first swap at 6 minutes, and then every time you swap a summoner spell, it lowers the cooldown of your next swap. So in the early to mid game, you basically get one summoner spell around level 6, and then as you go into the mid game, you continue to use Unsealed Spellbook and then swap the summoner spells and then lower the cooldown on it. So by the time even like the later parts of mid game roll around, like 25 minutes or so, you're gonna have a lot of utility in the extra summoner spells that you can have, even if they're just in small skirmishes or whatnot, whether it's a ghost, a barrier, an ignite, an exhaust, etc. If you have an exhaust in a team fight that you otherwise wouldn't have, then it's really, really difficult for the enemy to deal with, and you provide a lot of utility for your team through constantly stunning a target, and then also whenever they're not stunned, then they're exhausted or they're ignited, or you have heal for your ally, or you have barrier for yourself, etc. So much utility comes in Unsealed Spellbook, and everything else offered in the Inspiration Tree is also pretty good for Twisted Fate. So I'll come back to the other keystones, but the main one that I'm going to be talking about is going to be Unsealed Spellbook. So with Unsealed Spellbook, again, it puts you in the Inspiration Tree. For the second runes here, you have good options in Magical Footwear or Perfect Timing. I think Perfect Timing is going to be outweighing Magical Footwear in a lot of cases, as you're not really in an economic battle with the enemy mid laner, as you're not really looking to match their gold generation to a degree that you would need Magical Footwear versus the playmaking potential you get from Perfect Timing, since a lot of what you're doing is not fighting your lane opponent, but really fighting the map and working with your jungler or moving to side lanes in general. And whenever you do that, then Perfect Timing is going to give you a lot more value. With Perfect Timing, you gain a free stopwatch after 14 minutes, and then every kill and assist you get reduces the cooldown of that by 2 minutes. So you can get access to it even earlier, but even if you just get it at the 14 minutes, that's still completely fine. The one-time stopwatch, especially where you don't have to purchase it, is going to make it so that you have the opportunity to really swing how a fight plays out, because you can become invulnerable for a brief time, and that's usually just the time you need for Twisted Fate for your basic abilities and your W and your Q to get a second rotation of those off in a fight. So really, really useful rune. The only matchups in which you might run Magical Footwear would be another control mage matchup in which it's a wave clear one, but even then, I think that in solo queue most of the time, Perfect Timing is going to be outweighing Magical Footwear. For the third runes, your best option is going to be Minion Dematerializer, even though Biscuits and Futures Market are pretty good. Biscuit giving you mana basically, and then Futures Market giving you the access to buy items earlier. Since Twisted Fate isn't a champion that needs to buy a Lost Chapter early as you're building into Rod of Ages, the Futures Market loses a lot of value. And with Minion Dematerializer, it makes it so that you can dematerialize the caster minions, and then your Q will just one-shot them. So you don't have to be hitting those with your W or even with your auto attacks at a lot sooner of a stage of the game than you would otherwise be able to. So you get a lot of wave control with Minion Dematerializer, and then with the wave control, usually leads to other advantages, whether it's being in position for a skirmish or roaming to a side lane faster. For the fourth rune, all of these are also okay. Cosmic Insight giving you 5% cooldown reduction could help you get your W and Q off faster. Approach Velocity giving you more movement speed towards a target that you slow, so it'd be anytime you would red card or gold card someone, or even AoE red card them, then you have more movement speed towards them, but it's not so necessary, as you're already in range of them as you've stunned or slowed them. And then you have Time Warp Tonic, which makes it so that your potions and biscuits grant you some of their regeneration immediately, and then also give you movement speed while under their effects. And I think Time Warp Tonic is going to be your best bet, as since you're running Corrupting Potion, that extra movement speed is going to be really, really important for either kiting into the enemy whenever you're winning or moving away from them whenever you're losing. In almost every single matchup, whether it's melee or range, you get that utility. The value of also getting 50% of the healing and mana regeneration immediately is also really, really valuable, especially in the early levels for Twisted Fate. When you're against really strong mid lane champions like Irelia, who can kill you levels 1 to like 5, then it's very important to just keep your HP at a higher amount so that they can't do that, and that you can win the minion wave against them versus just winning against the champions. And then as you get later into the game, you still get the value out of Time Warp Tonic, as you get the 5% movement speed, which is going to give you, it's just going to help you in fights as you can get into range of targets or away from them from that 5% movement speed offered. So it's a really generally useful rune, and makes the laning phase very, very, it just makes it way more in your favor. For the secondary runes, you do have options in like Resolve, Sorcery. You have some bad options in Domination, and then pretty much no good options in Precision secondary. With Resolve secondary, you could run Bone Plating and Overgrowth. That gives you a lot of utility against melee matchups, as you just have a lot more effective health to play with. You could also run Demolish in these lanes, as once you have control over the lane, then you can start taking turret plates against them. But I think Overgrowth is it's just more health, and it's more guaranteed. You have to get the turret plates with Demolish for it to even give you more value, or to give you any value. With Bone Plating, after you take damage from an enemy champion, the next 3 spells or attacks you receive from them deal 30 to 60 damage less based on your level, and then it's on a 45-second cooldown. So against almost every single melee champion, but mainly the strong ones early like Irelia, it's going to give you more effective HP to play with, as whenever they initially jump on you, then they have to get through that. They have to get through the Bone Plating before they even start damaging your health pool. And then once they start damaging your health pool, then you can use the Corrupting Potion, and then you get the health immediately, and then you also get the movement speed to kite away from them, or to kite towards them if you're winning. So makes the laning phase a lot safer, and it makes it very lame for a melee champion to deal with, as their reward for like getting onto you is lessened to a huge degree because of Bone Plating. With Overgrowth, you absorb life essence from monsters or minions that die near you, permanently increasing your maximum health for 3 every 8 that you absorb. And whenever you've absorbed 120 monsters or minions, you gain an additional 3.5% maximum health. So you just have more health to play with because of this. And since you're already building a health item first in Rod of Ages, gives you more percentage health with that. But if you do have a winning lane, or if you're more comfortable in TF, I think Demolish is completely fine. But I do think Overgrowth is just a more consistent option for Twisted Fate. In Sorcery, you have okay options in Nimbus Cloak and Celerity. I don't think that you would need something like Mana Flow and Transcendence like other mages would, as you're already going to have enough mana from the Rod of Ages, and then also Blue Buff, and then also TF's Blue card. So there might be matchups in which like wave clear matchups, it'd be the same thing where you could take Magical Footwear instead, where you're just playing a scaling matchup anyways, where Mana Flow would be completely fine, as the whole game would just come down to the wave clearing. Think about champions like Vel'Koz, and yeah, basically just champion like Vel'Koz, Orianna, not Orianna, Vel'Koz, Anivia, and then like, who am I forgetting? Vel'Koz, Anivia, basically those two. Malzahar, champions like that just entirely negate the laning phase, and then the whole game comes down to wave clear. Then having a scaling option like this, where you have the extra mana for Mana Flow, and then also the mana regen, and then 10% cooldown reduction at level 10 just for surviving the lane, becomes more viable than having a laning tool like Bone Plating Demolish, or even the utility in Nimbus Cloak and Celerity, as a lot of what you're doing is just stuck in lane. With Nimbus Cloak plus Celerity though, you get access to a lot more movement speed, and that movement speed is really, really useful for Twisted Fate, as it's just going to help you get in range of targets or run away from them. With Nimbus Cloak, after you cast a summer spell, you gain a movement speed increase that lasts for 2.5 seconds and allows you to pass through units. The movement speed increase is based on the cooldown of the summer spell that you cast. So this, in combination with Unsealed Spellbook, becomes really, really annoying for the enemy to deal with, as you can be casting like 4 summoner spells in a fight with Unsealed Spellbook. And with that, you're going to get a movement speed increase every single time you do. And then with that movement speed increase, it's going to allow you to position in a more offensive or defensive manner. In both cases, you're winning against the enemy depending on how the fight's going. So the utility offered from Nimbus Cloak, especially if you're running Unsealed Spellbook, is really, 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 really high, especially for Twisted Fate, whose entire kit revolves around getting a gold card on someone. With Celerity, all movement speed bonuses are 7% more effective, and you gain an additional 1% movement speed. So Celerity, kind of the same deal. It's going to be working with Time Warp Tonic. It's also going to be working with your boots, but then mostly just with the movement speed gain from Nimbus Cloak. So you can run Celerity. I think Absolute Focus is okay. I think Transcendence would probably outweigh it in a lot of cases because the cooldown reduction offered is going to inevitably give you more damage than the extra ability power offered from Absolute Focus, as you can just get a second rotation of your W and Q off, and Twisted Fate is a champion that's really geared to do that anyways. And he also doesn't get a lot of CDR that early, so Transcendence is also really useful in that sense of just getting him that CDR at a pretty meaningful point in the game without having to buy items for it. Gathering Storm also isn't bad. Like Water Walking, you can make an argument for it, but it's not that useful. So yeah, I think your best option in the sorcery tree is Monoflow Transcendence or Nimbus Cloak Celerity. And in most cases, I think you should be looking to take Nimbus Cloak Celerity whenever you're not playing into a melee matchup in which you need Bone Plating and Overgrowth. So basically just ranged matchups, probably Nimbus Cloak Celerity, and then melee matchups, probably Bone Plating and then Overgrowth. With the Domination tree second, there's really nothing too useful. You could run like Taste of Blood and then Ultimate Hunter. With Ultimate Hunter, by the time you have it stacked up, cooldown reduction would be normal cooldown reduction, not just cooldown reduction on your ult, would be like as useful as the cooldown reduction on your ult anyways. TF ult is also not that long of a cooldown. So like Transcendence would be doing what Ultimate Hunter wants to do without having to stack it up by getting unique kills and assists. So it's a lot easier and more practical too, as you're also getting CDR on your basic abilities. Taste of Blood functions as a laning tool, giving you more effective HP against ranged matchups. But where TF can't make great use out of something like Ravenous Hunter or even Relentless Hunter, then you just lose a lot of value in the Domination tree because of that. So like, yes, you could have this laning tool, but then the stacking components of either healing on abilities or movement speed out of combat just isn't that useful. And then everything in Precision Secondary just also isn't that useful. Like you could have extra mana from Presence of Mind, and then you could have like extra attack speed. It doesn't outweigh the extra movement speed offered from Nimbus Cloak alone. And then you put the Celerity or the Transcendence on top of that, and it's even worse. You have like no laning tools with these either. A lot of what your runes are is like for your early power, and you're really getting like no early power out of the precision tree. It's just like this other scaling thing that Twisted Fate just doesn't need. He doesn't need the damage amplification from Coup de Grace, Cut Down, or Last Stand either, so I really just don't see the precision tree for him. So for a default, I think Nimbus Cloak Celerity is completely fine. And then for the adaptive runes, I think you should be looking to take Adaptive Force. If you're playing into a like mixed damage matchup, so champions like Irelia, Mordekaiser, Kali, I think going double resistances is completely fine. So you could run Adaptive Force, Armor, and Magic Resist. If you're only playing into one damage type, I think you should look to run the double Adaptive Force plus the one resistance, depending on the matchup. But when you can, I think the double resistances is really, really useful for TF, because a lot of what you're doing is just trading your HP for like your cooldowns and then your position in the fight. So, and runes are mostly for the early part of the laning phase, which is usually the weaker parts for TF, into the stronger, more recent champions, go figure. But yeah, so that's that for Unsealed Spellbook. I do think it's the best option for Twisted Fate because of the utility it offers, and that's basically it. Like all the other damage options in the other trees that I'm going to go into just really don't come close to what's offered in access to extra summoner spells, access to a one-time stopwatch, being able to one-shot the minion wave with just your Q with Minion Dematerializer, the extra survivability with Time Warp Tonic, the extra movement speed from Nimbus Cloak and Celerity, or the extra movement speed from Nimbus Cloak and then the cooldown reduction from Celerity, and then the effective HP from Bone Plating and Overgrowth. So like, to outweigh all of that, let's see what the other rune pages have to offer, man. So with Electrocute, after you hit an enemy with 3 separate attacks, within 3 seconds you deal bonus damage to them. So you do get access to this extra damage that you otherwise couldn't have. Electrocute's on a 25-second cooldown, and the damage is based on your level, and then for TF, your bonus ability power. With this, it makes it so that you can kill your lane opponent when you have Ignite at certain stages of the game that you otherwise wouldn't be able to because of just the raw burst that you have. But if you're looking to run something like this, it's going to help you kill worse opponents better, but then it's not going to help you win the game, as like you still have to go to mid to late game, and Unsealed Spellbook's just going to be more useful in those situations because you have more summoner spells. So with Electrocute, you do have that extra damage, and then for the secondary runes, best bet's going to be Taste of Blood. Taste of Blood, again, giving you more effective HP throughout the laning phase, and then any of these are fine. Zombie Ward, giving you extra wards whenever you clear them. Ghost Poro, extending the duration of your ward, basically, and then Eyeball Collection, giving you extra ability power for getting kills and assists. I think Eyeball Collection is going to be your best bet, and then like everything in the fourth tree here is kind of useless. Like you can have healing on abilities, you can have out of combat movement speed, and then you can have ultimate cooldown reduction. And like I said before, I don't think you need the ultimate cooldown reduction, as Twisted Fate ult it's already low enough, and the early ults are like more about the impact that you have with them versus how many you get off throughout the early game. And since you have to stack this up too, it makes it a lot worse of a rune too, because by the time you have it fully stacked up, even in a winning game, having more ults doesn't mean that you get more kills, as the enemy is just going to be confined to their towers anyways. So I guess the best option would be Ravenous Hunter, giving you healing on your abilities, since TF does deal a meaningful amount of damage with his abilities, that you have more effective HP to play with this, but you do have to stack it up still. With Ravenous Hunter, you're healing for a percentage of damage dealt by your abilities, and then it's based off a Bounty Hunter stack, so each unique kill and assist you get is going to be giving you more damage, or more healing off the damage that you deal from your abilities. So that's that's all you get from the domination tree. A bit of healing, AP if you get kills and assist, and this extra damage on hitting 3 separate damaging things. Great. And then for the secondary runes, I think you'd still want Inspiration with Minion Dematerializer and Time Warp Tonic, because you still want to be able to one-shot the wave and then have control over it, and then Time Warp Tonic still has the utility of giving you the extra movement speed. If you were to run something like Nimbus Cloak Celerity, it would lose a bit of value as you don't have access to the extra summoner spells with Unsealed Spellbook. So yeah, I think, and you wouldn't be able to one-shot the backline without Minion Dematerializer, so you're really just narrowing yourself down with this rune page. So again, the entire utility of this page is just the damage from Electrocute, and to trade off Unsealed Spellbook and all the utility offered from the entire Inspiration tree, plus another secondary tree with that, is super low value in my opinion. So the other option is Arcane Comment. Arcane Comment you can easily proc with the red card on a minion, the gold card on the enemy, or even with your Q. But the Arcane Comment's only guaranteed to land, obviously, with the red card, the gold card. So with Arcane Comment, whenever you damage an enemy champion, with an ability, it hurls a comment at their location, and then if the comment hits, it deals a bit of damage. And then hitting the enemy with other abilities is going to reduce the cooldown of Arcane Comment. So you are able to get it off multiple times throughout a fight, especially an extended fight where you're getting 2 or 3 rotations of your abilities off. But it's mostly just used for the poke in lane. But with the poke in lane, it has to be able to stick. And against a lot of lanes, you're just pushing in a couple waves and then recalling anyways, and adding a poke against the enemy becomes a lot harder than not. So with Arcane Comment, it puts you in the sorcery tree, and then you could still run Nimbus Cloak. You can also run Mana Flow Ban. I think Mana Flow Ban would be your best bet since you're playing for poke anyways, so you're naturally going to be spamming your abilities more often. And then with that, you have more mana to actually spam the abilities. With the third rune, I think that you're best off going with probably Celerity, as you're not really playing for scaling anyways, and since you're playing to poke, the extra movement speed offered from Celerity is going to help you get in range to actually land your W, your auto attack, etc. And then for the fourth being Scorch, as Scorch gives you more damage on your abilities too. So Arcane Comment in combination with Scorch does just give you more damage on your abilities in the early game, but a lot of early games for Twisted Fate aren't winning, And Unsealed Spellbook gives you extra value in just a naturally losing matchup in which you win by pushing the wave into them and then not fighting them than you would by getting extra poke damage on them. But there are lanes that Twisted Fate is going to be in which you could just attack them by having more poke against them. Champions like Rise, Talia, etc. So it's not that bad of a rune page, especially compared to the Electrocute page, because there is more offered in this page through the extra poke damage with Arcane Comment Scorch, and then the extra mana and then movement speed with Celerity and Mana Flow. And then the secondary runes would still be the same. So I don't think this page is that useless as compared to Electrocute, as Electrocute's kind of just adding this cheese factor where Arcane Comment's adding access to more damage that you couldn't have that's on a more consistent basis that works better with how Twisted Fate's kit works. So yeah, I think you should be looking to run Unsealed Spellbook in most matchups, but in Twisted Fate's hard winning matchups, I think that Arcane Comment's going to be your best bet, as it's going to help you dumpster them harder versus playing this more utility team-oriented role that Unsealed Spellbook lets you do. But Unsealed Spellbook is the best, so I mean, yeah. So that's my thoughts on Twisted Fate runes. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I try to answer all of them. If this video helped you, leave a like on the video, helps me. You could also subscribe. It's just League of Legends content on this channel. And yeah, that's that. Hope this helps, man. Twisted Fate. Love them. I'm an Apto fan. How